Hello, my name is Grian, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make 3 treehouse designs. The first one is this very simple oak one designed for a large tree. So let's get straight into this first design. I have picked the top of a hill, and I've had to spawn in my own tree, and this is the one we're going for, the absolute largest that it goes for, because any other tree is simply not big enough to have enough space for a treehouse to work on. So you can see that there are almost natural platforms where we can build on. So what we need to do is actually shave off some of the layers of leaves on those natural platforms to give us some space to build on. It's okay to make it look weird to begin with because we're going to add back some of the leaves a little later on. Basically, this house is going to be sitting on top of the natural shape of the tree, and we do this by creating a framework to begin with so that we know where each individual part of this house is going to go. So as you can see, I've got 3 different layers which I have highlighted on this tree to build some framework on, and I've started just by placing some pillars up in the air to indicate where this is going to go. And you might be able to already tell that this is not a particularly big house. None of these tree houses are. They are intended to be small starter houses. Having said that, even though they are starter, that doesn't mean that you don't need to collect quite a few materials. My idea of a starter house is small and doable within a few Minecraft days. Anyway, let's get back to the build where we need to fill in the floor. Removing some of the leaves is a natural process, and if it looks odd, we can replace some of them later. We need to make sure the structure of the house is sound first. So you'll notice that we've connected up all of those pillars with some spruce wood. However, it doesn't necessarily have connections everywhere. In the bottom left, there aren't any at all, and it's okay to leave some sections open. So as you can see, things are starting to take shape, and right now all it is sitting on top of this tree. But because of the mixed layers on the Y coordinate, it actually looks like it's integrated into the tree itself. Don't be afraid to mess with the leaves. So what we need to do now is add a roof, and I've chosen dark oak simply because the palette fits the best with this house itself. You can use something else or whatever's available to you in the local vicinity if this is your true starter house. Don't go leaving the nasty comments saying, oh, you can't get dark oak and spruce and everything without traveling. Yes, I know. I'm just giving you the ideal situation. And you'll notice that when I'm doing this roof, it's not symmetrical, it's not flat, it is working with the shape of the building. It works its way up gradually, but doesn't also connect with every single layer. This largest section on the top has a very fluid movement of half slabs to reach the top, and it's got a very distinct overhang. I've also added in a bunch of leaves, but also where it looked like I was trying to cover up a hole, there's no point because it will always look like I'm trying to cover up a hole. So I just made a little balcony instead to make it look a bit more natural. So let's take a step back, and you'll notice that it's very spindly. Like, this tree doesn't look like it should be holding up this big house on its own. The trunk is too small. So what we're going to do, and indeed what we're going to have to do with a few other designs, is make the trunk thicker. And that includes just adding a single layer around the side and then adding some roots that are spreading out from the bottom at different heights. So now what we need to do is fill in all of those holes with some stained glass windows. However, if you don't have any of the dyes necessary, just go for normal glass, that's absolutely fine. Again, I'm just adding that different variation on color in case you want to put the extra effort in to make the palette look a bit nicer. The last thing I did was add some grass and some flowers on the top just to give it a bit of color in there with some red and some white tulips. The interior is what you make of it. They aren't particularly big, they are cozy, so put a chest where you can, a furnace where you can, and a bed, and you've got your finished house. So, this is the first design designed on top of a large oak tree. It's fairly simple, it's got 3 different segments, it's got a nice open plan, but it is small and it is snug like all of these treehouse designs. It took about 20 minutes to make in creative, so to get all the materials and to build it in survival, it will take a little bit longer, but significantly less time than making a gigantic castle. So let's move on to the next design, which is in a spruce forest. And as you can see, the design is a bit chunkier than the other one. This is because we don't have a platform to work on, we just have a large tall tree. And as you might be able to tell, none of these trees are big enough for us to work with, so we actually need to spawn in a large one, or you could travel to the biome where you find these. So this is the size we're looking for. However, you could adapt this to pretty much any of the mega spruce trees to work with. So we need to make sure we've got enough height between the base of our house and the top of the tree. We really don't want to be removing any of the leaves, otherwise we're really going to remove the idea that this is a tree house. So somewhat down the tree, we've added in a platform, and the size is important. It's not too big and not too small. About 2 blocks out from the trunk itself is pretty good place to start with. So we're going to focus on the underneath to begin with. So we're going to add some supports that connect to each corner of this large trunk, and it will look odd to begin with, but once we add the detail in, it will start to look a bit more in place. So diagonally going down, we add a spruce log until you reach the center, and then add a dark oak slab on the top to remove that white edge on the top and bottom of the texture. And this gives it some resemblance of support. It's completely aesthetic, of course, anything can float in Minecraft. At the bottom, we're going to make this a bit thicker by adding some roots that are going to spread out. We've also added some fences just as a bit of a detail. Also added some leaves just mixed in there to remind people that this is a tree and not just a house on a stilt. So this is what the bottom should look like once you've got that ready. So now it's time to build the actual house on top, which may look complicated to begin with, but if you take it slowly, it should all work out. So on the side, we're going to angle it upwards, giving the house some height. On the 2 corners, we need to add some logs and then add some staircases that reach up to it. We then layer some dark oak staircase across the top, and this is going to indicate where the dormer and the roof start on the other side. I realize that I have used different blocks using spruce and dark oak. Like I said, this is the ideal palette. You can use more readily available textures. So moving on, we're making a dormer for this tree house now, adding a little roof and just a very simple window. I've also started where the roof is going to be, but because we haven't got any other sides, we're not going to complete that bit just yet. So what we're going to do now is work on the longer sides and make this shape where it goes up and then reaches a flat surface at the top, right where it hits where the leaves are at the top. Like I said, we don't want to remove any of those leaves. It's quite important to keep that top intact. This may look really big, but on the inside, it's actually quite small and cozy. So now that we've got that arch, we can start filling in those bits in between. Now there's a bit of an awkward space where you have to remove some leaves to get the roof in, but most of the time you can work around it. So there's a little bit of space here, and it's just making your roof integrate into the tree without taking away too much of the definition of the leaves. It should work out pretty nicely in the end. So now we need to replicate what we've done on the far side to this side. Now again, it does look like it's going to end up being big, but on the inside we're talking about 2 blocks either side of the central pillar, so there really isn't a lot of space, but this can look really nicely detailed from the outside, and it's a really good standard of treehouse. So the front is a very standard design. It's just got a nice shape. It doesn't have your stereotypical cone-shaped roof. It's got a very nice flowing roof that connects all the way around but keeps that leaf intact on the top. We're not actually going to make a dormer on this side. We're going to connect up the roof all the way around to keep a flowing sense of shape for this roof. Again, just using spruce slabs to do so, and when we hit the leaves, just try and wrap around it. In fact, you could go even over the top if it doesn't look quite right. Either way, the roof should flow quite nicely all the way from one side to the other, but for the most part you're going to be looking at that central face with a very simple detail to it. So that is the design of the spruce one. As you can probably tell, it's a bit of a step up from our oak one, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have a very simple design and move on to some slightly more complicated ones in different scenarios for those that fancy a little bit more of a challenge. However, all of these are doable within 20 minutes in creative mode. I made this in about 21. So in survival, yes, it will take a few Minecraft days. But the last one I want to show you is a little bit more technical than this one or the oak one. So let's move on to that. Now, working in a jungle is a bit messy, so I'm actually going to use this one in a flat world so that you can see what's going on. And this is the design we're going for. As you can see, it's a bit more complicated. So let's get straight into it. So this is our tree, and it's one of the taller ones that you will find in the jungle, and you can pick any one. There are loads of these. There's probably no need to spawn them in if you find a jungle. At the bottom, we're going to thicken it up much like we did with the spruce one earlier. It's just got different heights of log with some fence and some half slabs just dotted around. It's just very sporadic. There's no technique to it. You've just got to get those different Y coordinates and it should look a-okay. So now it's time to move on to the tough bit, where we put the platform. Somewhere in the top third is a good idea. Again, leaving the space between your platform and the top of the tree. We don't want to be removing too many of the leaves. We need to make a platform that is almost circular. So you start with a square, rip off the corners, and you've got what you need, which is a rough circle. About 4 blocks each side should do it, with 1 block in each corner to separate them. Underneath, we've got this sort of hang down thing, and this is just part of the style. Again, it's all aesthetic, but most of this is jungle wood and spruce wood. Obviously, you can tell now that spruce is my favorite block. So we're going to add some supports, much like we did with the other one, just going 1 block in until you reach the trunk of the tree where it connects. And we're actually going to add another platform that's slightly smaller that reaches just below the one we've made. So we need to add another support, just an L shape made out of log and spruce that reaches where we're going to put the platform. A 3x3 size should do this one nicely, and it's still going to have a circular shape because when we add the logs on the outside, leaving that corner intact will give it a slightly circular shape, even though the fact is it's actually square. But underneath we have the hang down effect that we had on the other one. It is slightly closer together, which is what makes this support not stand out too much. It's all about keeping that style consistent. However, we are focusing right now on the foundation of this build. It's much easier to build up the walls once we know exactly what the floor space is going to look like. So where this leaves overhang on a branch, we're actually going to create a little balcony on top of it because it would look odd to have a structure sitting on it. So we've got this nice balance of platform, smaller platform, and balcony, and it's time to actually add in the structure for it. As you can see, again, I'm not removing many of the leaves at all. I rearranged where the balcony was, but for the most part the leaves are intact, and I'm making the roof just a lip around the framework that we made earlier. So now we're going to work on the larger platform. Now that we've defined the style, it's time to work on this one. We need to connect the bottom of these leaves to the platform itself to make sure that the whole thing looks like it's interconnected. It's part of the style of this particular build. So the log pillars have been raised just 1 block below, and that's quite important because we need some space to integrate this lip with the jungle planks that I've just made. And I also did a few details with the spruce staircase to give it a bit of depth and a bit of shape. This is all aesthetic and is unnecessary in the long run. So we need to make our way round the build, making sure not to mess up too much around the trunk itself because it's not a perfect circle if you include the trunk itself. So we just need to continue that design all the way through, creating a lip that goes all the way around and overhangs in slab. But the leaves don't match up. It looks like it's just floating on the top. So if we just droop some down over the top of the balcony, it actually makes it look more integrated into the design and less of that flat surface where it's just overhanging. adding some leaves is a great idea. Where the log shows, you can add some trapdoors just for some extra detail. It's just those minute details that make a really big difference to a design. On the balcony, I just added a bunch of fences and fence gates that shouldn't be too expensive to make considering you're in a jungle full of logs to take. But there is spruce involved, so you will need to collect some of that to make this design work with the colour scheme. Again, also used some stained glass on this one. Again, you can use just non-stained glass if you can't get your hands on the dye. But that is the design for the jungle treehouse. But this is in a flat world. You would probably want to see it in a jungle setting to know if this is a house that you want to invest some time in. And again, this one only took me 26 minutes to make. I do still consider this a starter house just because of the size and compactness of it, but that doesn't mean it can't look good. So, that is the jungle treehouse in the setting of a jungle. I did put it just on the periphery so that it isn't too hard to see what it looks like in the setting. So I really like this design, and indeed all three. So that's the end of today's video. I hope you've enjoyed this. It was a hard job to make 3 different designs, and Pearlescent Moon helped me a lot to make these work. So thank you to her, and thank you to you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you left a comment giving me your opinion not only on these builds, but on some more ideas that you would like me to make in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye!